Hello friends, welcome to this first progress report of Resave.org's Dominican project. So we are now September 8th, which is 11 days after we finished our mandatory government quarantine. So this progress report will go from August 27th until September 7th. During that period, what I did was create this map while traveling the village to do a complete survey of the properties to assess what was the need, as of course things have evolved since last year. So hurricane shelters have been built in the next village over. Some people have been given grants or other means to rebuild. So the needs as to where and for whom these shelters are interesting has changed. So this survey was to assess that. It actually, and I will explain that a little bit more detail further on, but it will impact greatly the way that I shaped and scheduled and timelined the project initially. I think it's important to be more, adaptable than rigid when it comes to that. I think that listening really to the needs and adapting the project rather than having a mindset of this is what we do and this is what you get will give us an approach that's going to be in the both long term and short term more beneficial and more approachable for the people. I will go into more detail as we look at the events that have unfolded both in the past year and while we were here in the last 10 days. And this, as I detail the events, will give you a better understanding as to what those changes to the project are and how it's going to be able to impact the local villagers. So let's look at the events unfolding this week in just a second. But before we do, I just want to take a second to make a quick sidestep and say thank you to my colleague and friend Judd Buchanan, who was supposed to be our media and video expert coming with me on the trip. Unfortunately, due to him coming in from Brazil and transiting through the United States, he was not able to travel. Some additional travel restriction presidential decrees from Mr. Trump have prevented that, and we have been unable, due to the newly implemented stricter quarantine rules here in Dominica as well, to get him here in a time frame that would actually make sense. So I just wanted to take a second to thank him for his efforts as he tried tremendously hard to make it here, and also at the same time give notice that this may impact my ability to produce as much content and as good quality as I had originally expected to do. This will not prevent us from moving forward with the project in any means. However, it will maybe hinder my ability to document it as much as I would have originally wanted to, as I will have to juggle both the construction and management of the project, the web presence, and the creation of the multimedia content. It is a lot of man hours for me alone on this. And the main goal, of course, is to get those shelters built to increase the level of safety of the local population. The content is a great means to raise awareness and generate additional funding, but for the moment, with my personal lines of credit, I am able to finance the project as I envision to be able to achieve in the next couple of months. So this will basically, the content may take us a little bit of a side step. I will, however, try to maintain progress reports at least every week or 10 days as best as I can to maintain the level of transparency that I aim to achieve with this organization. So without further ado, let's look at the events that have unfolded during our last 10 days.
Alright guys, we're finally out of quarantine after 14 days. Headed to town, get some supplies. So never a dull day in Dominica, not even an hour out of quarantine, and we got into a little car crash here in the bus. Nothing major, but as you can see, the roads are quite narrow, and so the two buses passed too close to each other, and one of the mirrors got blown off. Of course, whose fault it is hard to tell. The road is tight, everybody's passing fast. There's a car parked on the side of the road, shouldn't have been. So now it's a little bit of a fuss trying to figure out who's gonna pay for whose mirror.
Eventually, the other guy just drove off, so we grabbed the bus again and headed into town. When I was there, I managed to grab this awesome view of the whole town and the coastline, trying out my drone for the first time in Roseau. And then I headed to this little shop with my friend Honey, and we took a celebratory shot of a spice rum.
Yeah! Yes, I. Cheers, I. Drink it. Alright, let's go, drink it. You need your chaser, boy. Alright, you need your chaser. Ooh. So that was rum infused with cinnamon.
Very hot. Very hot. Hot.
Yeah, so actually still day one. So actually it's still day one. Came back from town pretty early today, and unfortunately through some bureaucratic nightmare I didn't end up manage to get to the proper government office I was supposed to get. I got transferred from building to building. Felt like Asterix for a minute. So I decided I was gonna go to the sea, which is in Rosalie. So that's it's about an hour and 15-minute hike from my village. We came back at I left the house at 2:45, which means I will arrive at the beach at 4, and then the sun sets at 6:20. So that means that by 5:30 tops I gotta get moving, otherwise I'll be stuck in the middle of the jungle in the track with no light.
Okay, so 2.5 hours worth of walk time might be a bit excessive for just an hour of R&R on the beach, but I wanted to get on with the project as fast as I could, but I still needed to get out of the house properly, so I figured that was a good compromise.
I am literally walking through a field of butterflies. Rosalie Beach, which is a black volcanic sand beach, and there is never anyone.
It's important to note, however, that one of the reasons why there's nobody ever swimming there is that there's been several drownings because of a strong riptide undercurrent. So if you ever go swimming there, you have to be very careful because the waves will kick your ass. Rosalie Beach is also lucky to be one of the rare places in the world home to nesting areas for green, leatherback and hawksbill turtles. The local as well protect the eggs and bring them to eclosion safely by safeguarding them in the local sea turtle hatcheries. For day 2, plain and simple, it's Roseau take 2. On the 5th day, I went up to the Petite Soufrière and Saint-Sauveur Village Council to introduce myself to those who didn't already know me and explain what I was going to do and tell them the purpose of my foundation. On my 6th day, I caught a ride from a big truck down to Roseau to get my internet and phone number situation fixed up. And while I was there, I also went to the industrial area to look at some tools and materials for the upcoming construction phase of the project. On the 7th day, I started my survey, and it brought me to some houses that were completely destroyed, yet were still occupied.
So yeah, I did the track there, and you're the first one there in front. So this should be you.
Is you that saying but by Diane over there?
Exactly.
Oh,
yes.
okay.
Yes.
What they're telling me is around here is disaster zone, and then they cannot give me a loan to build another house. So I just struggling. Very expensive now to build another house like that again.
Of course.
For me,
And this was built by hand a long time ago,
Yes,
and that
long
was a
time.
big house.
By hand. Yes, by
Had
hand. We build all that.
seven rooms, 8 rooms. Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4 sleeping rooms and the dining room, and you can see it. You see how it's breaking, it cracking. That piece yourself, because plenty people telling me, I taking chances to sleep under there, but where will I go?
And it's crumbling right on top
Yes,
of you.
it breaking. You know, it's spreading thing. Stones falling.
The steel reinforcement is rusting, so it's expanding, and that's what's breaking the concrete.
Yes, the steel.
Yeah, so that means there's moisture coming from that
On top,
side.
yes.
As my survey continued, it brought me to houses that had been completely abandoned while the owners rebuilt in different villages. Some other people live in places that were never really even houses, more like a standing concrete wall left from a destroyed house that's been turned into a shack by leaning a few boards and a few pieces of galvanized metal. Oftentimes it's all held together by just a few pieces of board and maybe a few ropes. So once more I need to go to Roseau to get some supplies, and since in Dominica the buses bring you to the city in the morning and pick you back in the afternoon, regardless if you have one thing or 100 to do, you're stuck there for a few hours. So what I did is I went to the botanical gardens and caught some awesome views. By the 10th day, I had mostly finished my survey and established my best candidates. The first one is Tisun, and his little shack is seen here with a suitable portion of flat land. The second candidate is Jacob, his wife, and their neighbor, who also have 2 small shacks as their dwellings and a very suitable flat land area as well. And the third one is Junior, who has a small tiny shack along the side of the road, but he is currently building a large wooden house on top of a hill, which he's building by himself with some discarded materials. The large straight posts you can see, there are actually downed electricity poles that he's reused. But even when completed, the house will still just be a wooden house, so putting one of the small shelters on the flat land next to it will provide additional security for him while he's building and even after completion.
Hi again. So all this brings us to the last couple of days where I've basically finished my survey. So I compiled the information that I got, the feedback from the people. As I showed you in the previous segment, at the end I pretty much knew what were my most likely candidates. And so I'm ready to move to the construction phase. Because, as I said, some changes have been made to the timeline of the project. First and foremost, the initial phase 1, as you can see on the screen, was initially to purchase tools and do some minor repairs. The reason we will skip that step entirely is because there is no need for repair. So basically, if I go through the findings that I've seen in terms of what are the states of the properties in the village, there are 4 basic categories. If we go from worst to best. The worst is the type of house that we saw that is basically overgrown with vegetation, has been completely totaled and abandoned right away. There was never any attempt made to go back to live there. People have either built another house in the village or just left the village altogether. Then the second type after that, second worst, is houses that have been where you could label as completely functionally destroyed but still have structural remnants. So for example, the lady that we saw in the first day on day 7, her entire roof is gone, her concrete structure is pretty much crumbling, but she still lives there, and that structure there cannot take repairs in any way, shape or form because there's no basic structure for anything to be built on. It's not safe, legal or smart to try to improve upon this type of damage. The third structure, which is just a tad bit more secure again, but still very precarious, is the tiny shacks that we saw. So basically those are makeshift habitations that have been constructed after the disaster from remnants of debris, pieces of metal, of wood, of this and that, held together by oftentimes rope nails and basically the sheer weight of cinder blocks on the rooftop. Those don't need any repair either, because basically they don't have any structure to be basing repairs on. They're makeshift properties that oftentimes don't have any foundations or any proper engineering into their construction, so it makes no sense to try to improve and bolster them, as they would never be able to withstand any storm in any case. And then we have the fourth category, which is people who have been able to rebuild entirely. Either their house wasn't too badly damaged, or they got a grant, loan, or other means of subsidy to rebuild their house. So these people don't actually need repairs either. So basically this brings us to phase 2. Phase 2 was originally predicted to be the construction of these 20-foot dome shelters. However, I'm modifying that as well a little bit to reduce the scale into 10-foot dome shelters, which can be used more as a little bit of a safe room, bunker type area rather than an entire dwelling. The reason for that is based on 3 observations and things that I've been told. First observation is the general lack of space. So when you are building a rectangular house, you kind of have, it's kind of like Tetris. You have different size and lengths and shapes that you can work with to accommodate the terrain. When you're building a 20-foot diameter circle, it's 20 foot across in all directions. So it's very tricky to find the proper location to put that. The second concern is related to the size once more, is that places that oftentimes have this amount of size to build an entire house there will have whatever structure people are currently living in, so be it their damaged house or their shack or this and that, and it's very emotional for them to completely part from that to live into something that is very foreign to them, namely the dome structure. And that is the third observation, is there's a certain level of skepticism towards this new type of technology, especially when it's not a square structure that everybody's used to. And of course, given the people who I'm bringing these ideas to are people who are living a very simple life, farming and this and that. They're not too familiar with the engineering concepts of, you know, like the weight to strength ratio and load distribution, and how the shape can affect the strength at which the hurricane, which is giving 404 pounds per square foot, it compounds on a flat wall, causing the joints to burst, whereas on a round structure it can only affect a certain small part, and then as it's getting wind from all sizes, it kind of like counteracts. I'm trying to explain all those principles, but it doesn't really resonate to them in like a concrete sense. So what a lot of people have told me, like for example the lady we saw at the very beginning whose roof is entirely gone, she has a little bit of a plot of land where she's interested in building a little property, but as she said, she cannot get a loan because it's a disaster zone. And she's very reticent to the idea of living in a dome shelter before she's actually seen what it is. So what's interesting with getting these smaller structures built is that we'll be able to build them in a wider range of locations. Oftentimes, as you can see, for example, there's room next to the little shack, or there's a little bit of space in the yard, so we can annex the structure to their current dwelling, which would, if for example, if they relocate their bedroom into that structure, gives them a very sound, safe space to basically rest and shelter if there's a storm, but it doesn't prevent them from maintaining their regular lifestyle and type of life that they're used to by maintaining their current dwelling. So for example, if you have your safe bedroom in a dome shelter next to your tiny shack where your bathroom, living room and kitchen are located, even in case of a storm, even if everything's washed out, you have your safe space and you can rebuild those structure, or you can at this point decide that, hey, perhaps it was a great idea to have the dome and then rebuild in a more sound way in the future. So that's how I'm going to be modifying the project to basically fit more squarely into the needs of the local population. Another interesting point is that after I personally leave, the equipment which is reusable, so what we call the airform, which is basically a large vinyl balloon that you use to inflate and that allows for the creation of the concrete structure without any scaffolding and this and that, and is reusable. This equipment I'm leaving behind, which was part of phase 3, which is basically trying to train some people locally to use that technology and allow them to supervise the construction of additional shelters while I myself am not present, which then can create a source of income for the people that are supervising the project, in the sense that they can kind of like quote unquote rent their expertise and this type of project, and it also gives the ability of the local population to benefit from the low cost, high strength, high security type of structure that this technology allows. So by having a smaller size shelter, the entry point, the cost of entry is much lower, and this bodes in well with the type of economy that we see locally, which is basically a subsistence farming economy. What's interesting about that is that this type of revenue source is very much cyclical or cyclical, however you say that. Namely, for example, you plant 1,000 plants of dashin, which is a local root vegetable. They'll bear 4 pounds each, for example. So then you'll have 4,000 pounds of dashin in 6 months, which you'll be able to sell for $2 a pound. So you'll have $8,000 for half of your year. So if, for example, you were interested in building a dome shelter, but you wanted to build a 20-foot dome shelter, you'd pretty much have to spend all your acquired money into building the large unit, and that would leave you very little to subsist. So what would happen is either they would have little to subsist, or they would not be able to complete the construction project, which leaves them with nothing in the end. But a more interesting option is using the smaller structure. Subsistence farmer could, once they have their harvest, keep half of their money to subsist until the next harvest and use the other half to build a small dome, and then eventually build a second one next to it and a third one. So you could have one dome here, one dome there, and create a small roof made of wood or galvanized sheeting in between, giving you a little bit of an outside atrium if you want to live Roman style. So this is another factor as to why I think the 10-foot dome might actually be a more suitable option. Interestingly enough, I kind of saw that coming as I was thinking of the logistics of the project. So I had already advised the company from which I'm purchasing the equipment that this may be one of the options. So I had my shipping quoted for all of the various options, so I don't lose any time in that respect. Made sure that they had all the equipment in stock for the various sizes that I was considering. And so I'm pleased to say that as of today, I have received confirmation that the initial pickup has been made for the shipping. So it's headed to an airport, and it will be on a plane headed to Dominica real soon. So that brings us to basically starting the first phase, which is going to be construction. So in the next few days, as we wait for the equipment to arrive through the air freight, we will be digging on Thyssen's property the hole for the initial foundation. We'll be able to buy the concrete, the material, and do the initial foundation so that it's nice and set and ready to go for when the airform technology arrives. So basically this is what we'll be looking forward to for the next couple of weeks. I know it's a lot of talking, there's a lot of information to be conveyed. I think the rest of the progress reports are going to be a little more interesting, as we're going to be able to see what it's like to have these types of construction come up and what they look like and the local response. So I'm getting very excited towards that. I think it's going to be a great success. It's not too late for you guys to contribute. A wink. Maybe I can build 10 instead of 3 or 4 or 5. So that would be awesome. So yeah, stay tuned guys, and thank you for your time and attention.